Below Oaxaca, we now hit a stretch of geography that almost stalls the expedition. It takes us 25 days to cover 50 miles, 2 miles a day average, and we're plenty glad to make 2 miles. No wheel traffic of any kind ever traverses this section. It is simply a burro trail over which the plodding feet of human beings may travel or the heavily laden feet of animals, and we try to take our car through it. The first 3 days we make 9 miles, and I think spend more time on our hands and knees and on our stomachs than we do on our feet, trying to get the car safely over the sharp rocks and boulders. One false slip and a jagged rock might puncture the oil pan or the gas tank. That would finish us. We use the utmost effort and caution. If the big rocks can be moved, we lift or pry them out of the way. If they won't budge, we throw in loose rock to build around them and lift the car up over the top. It is torturous toil, hour after hour of back-breaking work to go 200 or 300 yards. Those engineers in Mexico City who said we couldn't do it, Arnold pronounces bitterly, sure knew what they were talking about. Only we've got to do it, so we keep right on working. It is while following this mountain burro trail for 25 days that we have our first introduction to something which becomes a deep-set conviction to all tropic travelers, that the breathtaking color and beauty of tropic flowers are almost beyond ordinary words. We see them everywhere, cactus blooms, vine flowers, orchids, huge clumps of them growing on old trees or stumps, air plants, flowers so delicate in color and texture that you swear they should grow in a hothouse instead of just any old place out in the open. These lovely red bougainvillea can be seen in almost any open patio in Mexico, and I never can resist the temptation to get on the shady side and shoot up through the petals toward the sun to give myself this luminous transparency of color, which I think is so delightful. Here is a flower of a little different color and texture. This chap's older brother had captured this little anteater a day or two before we came along, and now the boy plays with it as your little son or brother would play with a pet kitten around the house. And I'm sure you've heard of the marching ants of the other Americas, haven't you? Well, here they are. We see them many times, wearing their own little highway 2 or 3 inches wide, sometimes through grass as high as your knees. I take a stick and draw a trench across their highway, causing a traffic jam. A hard-boiled cop could easily get his hands full here. We follow them for almost 1/4 of a mile to see where they're getting the leaves, and finally find them running up and down the trunk of this rather peculiar tree. Some of the ants, with what seems almost human intelligence, are up in the tree, cutting off the leaves and dropping them down for other ants to carry off to their anthill home. I warned you about the realism of this picture, so I needn't hesitate over this sequence. During the 25 days through these mountains, we have 16 Zapotecan Indians helping us. Their meager diet is tortillas, beans, and the broiled skin of pigs. One Sunday morning after 18 days, they wake up and say they're hungry, that they're going hunting. We say, for what? They say, come along, senores, and you find out. So they take sticks and begin beating on hollow logs, and when they hear a sound, they reach in and pull out these long-tailed iguanas. But surely, senores, you're not going to eat them, I ask incredulously. Huh, amigo, they tell me. Seguramente, it is like you North Americans say chicken. Well, we North Americans will stick to chicken, is my retort. But they fall to work with gusto, cleaning the huge lizards in the preparation for the feast they're going to have, and do have. And now, don't these make you hungry? Our own eating is certainly nothing of a ceremony. We eat what we can get, and with as little fuss and bother as possible. Usually, we try to carry canned goods from capital city to capital city, but we often run out, as we do here in these mountains, and have to live on native food. Here, we're reduced finally to our last few cans of cheap sardines and the tortillas which we're able to buy from the native women along the way. Doesn't this look delicious? Well, it is, anyhow. I didn't say a word there, honest I didn't. Arnold and Kenneth claim that tortillas taste to them like a cross between cement and leather without salt, but I ate them as a boy and liked them. One thing, however, we unanimously agree is good. It is what the natives call panela. It is nothing in the world but the cooked juice of sugarcane, boiled until ready to solidify, then turned out into a wooden plate to cool and harden. And I do mean harden. Kenneth cuts off big chunks of it with his hunting knife, and we use it to sweeten our cocoa or postum, or as dessert, and sometimes we even allow ourselves the luxury of piecing on it between meals, because we find it nourishing and delicious and thoroughly What? Arnold suddenly puts his fingers to his mouth and scowls down, then puts his fingers back and finally says, "Why, Sully, it feels to me like I did," he snorts. I broke the doggone thing right off. And this is what we have to look at for 2 months because we haven't brought along a dentist. And this is his tooth and the piece of panela he broke it on. Believe me, this scene was not staged for the benefit of camera. And this seems to have been Arnold's day of misfortune. He was up on a boulder and slipped and fell. And as Kenneth puts on the iodine, he adds a little artwork to take away the pain. But Arnold doesn't seem to find anything humorous in the whole situation. He skinned himself up pretty badly. Knees, shoulders, back, ribs. But it's just something we have to take and say as little about as possible. Now come our days of real difficulty. What we've gone through up to now seems almost child's play compared to this. We try to pull the car by block and tackle with bulls hooked onto the ropes. But the bulls won't pull with the motor because the roar of it frightens them. So we finally have to send them home and get more men. Then we begin to make better time. One day we go 3/10 of a mile, another 6/10, another 5/10, and one day we go only 25 yards. It's heartbreaking toil, but we're determined not to turn back. We run the car so hot at times we can't even stop the motor. We switch off the ignition, but the car keeps right on running as if we hadn't even touched it. We burn out the clutch plate from sliding it too much, trying to go a few feet or inches at a time. Arnold changes it and puts in our only replacement. From now on, we must carry the car if necessary, but there can be no more sliding of the clutch. We have minor accidents, of course, every day, and there are plenty of times we'd be glad to call the whole thing off and go home, if it weren't that so many people had looked at us with raised eyebrows and said we'd never see South America. This is one of the times I'd be glad to go home. Oh, I'm not hurt very badly. I swung a pick at a boulder and instead of hitting it, struck myself in the shin. Just awkwardness, I guess. Certainly not much else. But I grit my teeth and daub in the rubbing alcohol, and then proceed to smear my leg with iodine and tell myself how brave I am, you know. And certainly no medical school in the country would ever give me a diploma when it comes to bandage wrapping. But it keeps out the dirt, and that's all we need. In spite of everything we can do, the car each day is subjected to terrific punishment. We cave in one door until it won't open. We break 3 of the windows. We strip 2 gears from the transmission, low and reverse, so that all we have left is high and second. We try to keep the rear fender from tearing the tire to pieces, and finally have to cut the thing off with a hacksaw. It's the first piece of the car we lose on our way to Cape Horn. But 10 days later, down in the jungle lowlands near the Guatemalan frontier, Arnold again begins grousing about the car. The thing pulls as if it didn't have any power, he tells me. Well, Arnold, it's only got 2 gears. What do you expect? I demand of him. I don't care. It doesn't pull as if it had any gears, he snorts and crawls underneath. When he begins muttering to himself and throwing things out, I get my cameras. As he finally stands up, he says, "No wonder the darn thing wouldn't pull. Look, it didn't even have an exhaust pipe." And the whole under part of the car looks just like this pipe and muffler, as if we'd turned it upside down and beaten it with picks and sledgehammers. We leave Mexico now after 3 torturous months, crossing her from north to south, and enter Guatemala through the customs house at Rio Suchiate. Immediately from here, we climb approximately 8,000 feet in one sustained climb from the jungle lowlands and fall over the crest of the mountains into this picturesque little valley, where the Indian farms hang almost like plaques on a wall on the steep sides of the mountains. Guatemala is one of the most interesting and colorful countries in the Western Hemisphere. Her colorfully costumed Indians, her clean red and white villages, her high, almost perfectly shaped volcanoes, and her magnificently beautiful Lake Atitlan, along with many other attractions, all make her a tourist paradise. No one who travels should miss Guatemala. During the war, she furnished us with great quantities of cinchona bark for quinine, jungle woods, rubber, minerals, and for many years she has shipped great quantities of bananas to your table and your neighbor's table next door. Now we find her friendly, interesting, and with an all-weather road from border to border, which seems like heaven after the 3 bad months we've just spent in Mexico. Also in Guatemala, of great interest to us, is found more ruined cities, left to the silence and the jungle for centuries by more of those earliest Americans about whom we know so little. Here we visit Quirigua, remnant of an ancient city of the Mayas. These carved stone stela are all that remain of the city, and they stand here like gaunt old men leaning against green sunlight in a little jungle hallway kept in repair by the United Fruit Company in cooperation with the Guatemalan government. There is no agreement yet among Maya research scientists as to the origin of these people. Archaeologists, anthropologists, historians, and others still are trying to arrive at provable conclusions. Much Mayan history is undoubtedly carved into these shafts of stone if we could only read it. The whole Mayan calendar and many dates have been deciphered, but synchronizing them with the Christian dates and the calendar as we know it has not yet been accomplished. The oldest date yet recognized in these carvings is variously estimated by recognized scientists to be from 179 BC to 444 AD. Still, no one knows. Some authorities see Hebrew features in the carved faces and believe the Mayans had Hebrew origin. Unmistakable Egyptian influence in architecture is noted by other students, and so it goes. Only this much is undeniable. These early Americans built cities whose populations numbered in the hundreds of thousands. They were a people of advanced culture and knowledge. Their calendar recordings of time, seasons, and some solar phenomena were more accurate even than our own. Their great temples and pyramids show a knowledge of building craftsmanship not humanly possible to uncivilized, ignorant, illiterate people. Yet for all this, from whence they came and to where they suddenly went, leaving their magnificent cities in ruins, is one of the great mysteries of America.